Your amplifier is much more than just a volume booster for your guitar or bass. It's a tone shaping tool. It defines your sound and is the most important link in your tone chain. From the preamp on the left to the master volume on the right, every knob and switch on your amp has a purpose. This week, we're diving into the architecture of amplifiers. What's going on behind the knobs? What's going on behind the knobs to help you unlock the full potential of your gear? Let's get nerdy. I'm Andy Schneider, career musician turned guitar coach, producer, and author of over 100 books from my publishing company, Sing Music Books. I was a high school band nerd, then a devoted jazz guy, then a backing musician for great artists in every type of music. From Austin to Nashville to New York City, I've learned from my musical experiences and the great musicians that were there with me. I'm a self-taught guitarist, but I was lucky enough to get the right bits of education early on in my career. Pairing that with the many conversations I've shared with more experienced musicians put me on the path to success, a path that built my skills to become the experienced, confident musician audiences enjoy today. I created the Guitar Nerd podcast to give you simple steps to building and growing your musical knowledge, having greater abilities, and getting that amazing music that's inside of you out and into the world where we can all enjoy it. Whether you're a beginner or experienced guitar or bass player, if you want to make fantastic music, you're in the right place, my friend. Now let's get nerdy. Welcome, everybody. Welcome back another week to Guitar Nerd. My name is Andy Schneider, El Nerdo Uno. This is the nerd place where we nerds talk nerdy stuff about guitars and bass guitars. Everything about them, that's what I'm crazy about. The gear, the theory, the technique, it's all important to us. And we have to have these conversations to make better music. That's what we're here for. Not just for the audience. We're here to help each other out and make a better world of music. Whether you're new to playing or you've been around the block quite a few times, as I have, and you've got lots of experience, I hope you'll find something here to energize and propel your music this week, give you new perspectives and new horizons as you begin making music again. Last week's episode was about arranging your parts, your bass parts, your guitar parts, arranging with a band for a better band experience. This week, we're turning our focus to one of the most important pieces of gear you've got. It's your amplifier. Whether it's a tube amp or a solid-state amp, they are absolutely crucial, and it's crucial to master what they do. They not only make your instrument louder, but they're real tone shapers. They're the character. It's been said that the amplifier matters much more to the overall tone of a guitarist than the guitar itself. I think that's probably true. It's not the only thing, but it's a big element in determining the final sound. With so many knobs, settings possible, combinations of settings, it can be overwhelming to know where to start. And I'd like to give you ground zero for where do you start to look for your tone inside your amp or inside an amp that's new to you. Every amp is a little bit different, but there are lots of similarities. Many more similarities than differences. And it's knowing those similarities and being able to use them that make forming a tone strategy possible. In episode 6, tube amp generations, we talked about the different generations of tube amps. I love tube amps personally. They're not the only kind. Solid state, digital amps, those are great too. I love the warmth and the familiarity of a good tube amp, and so many personalities are inside of different tube amps, and largely those personalities were defined by the generation that they came from, because the music of the time changed. It's a chicken and the egg thing, right? Was it the chicken or the egg? Did the equipment of the time shape the music, or did the music of the time shape the equipment? It's a little bit of both. 50s guitar amps sound different than 60s. 60s sound different than 70s or 80s or today's modern high gain amps. But what I'd like to talk to you about today isn't necessarily the generation of amp, but the way in that they are all similar. Every amp has similar sections. You can find similar knobs on amps of very different generations, and they do sort of the same thing. So I'm going to try to explain every knob of your amplifier, as promised in the show title, by explaining the section that it relates to. There are similar sections that develop the sound from the input from your guitar all the way through to hitting the speakers. And before we talk about the sections, let's talk about why the amplifier, a guitar amplifier in particular, is such a tone shaper. It's because it's not just a volume booster. If it were, we'd all be plugging into our stereos, I guess, and playing through that. But we don't generally do things like that because we appreciate the gain, the gainy sound that guitar amps give us. What is that? Okay, as a section of an amp or a whole amplifier is pushed to the breaking point, it starts to distort. And too much distortion sounds like lots and lots of rock and distortion. That can be cool for the right moment. Just before that, that's when the singy sustain comes out. That's when you start saying, wow, that guy is playing kind of loud. And he's got a tone that's sustained. That's the distortion. That's saturation happening. As you turn down the volume some more, each note starts to sound less sustained and more like an acoustic guitar, kind of, right? I mean, if we just pick notes in a room with no guitar amp, what does strings sound like? Pong, pong, pong. That's about how long a guitar note lasts. As you turn up the gain, it brings up the quiet parts of the note and makes it sound more sustained. Prong, prong, prong. So saturation is what we keep our eye and our ear on when adjusting guitar amps. And this goes for whether you like solid state amps or tube amps. It's okay. The sections of each amp are the same. In tube amps, each section of the amplifier is defined by the tubes that are in it. It's the tube that's doing the amplification in that section. And they have a certain characteristic sound. In a solid state amp, the tube is replaced by transistors or a chip, something made of silicon usually. And it works the same as a tube. It makes things louder. It provides the gain, but has a very different color. So regardless of whether you're a tube amp fan or a solid state person, that's okay. The sections of the amp remain the same. The first thing that your guitar signal meets in an amp is called the preamp. Preamp, wow, preamp, but it's an yeah, it's kind of an amplifier. But in the preamp section, there's first a buffer. That's something like in a tube amp, a little buffer tube. All it does is kind of just cushion the sound and make sure it gets to the preamp itself. The preamp is the first stage of gain. Turning up the preamp increases the drive, increases the gain, increases the saturation that happens right there. Now, keep in mind, we love saturation, right? We love lots of singy sustain. They make us sound awesome, and they provide a lot of length to the notes. But once you've turned up a knob, you can't turn it back down again. Or should I say, once you've turned up the gain in a section, you can't ungain it. Your sound is now a little distorted, a little compressed, a little saturated. And it's not going to reverse itself in any other section. You've still got a few more sections to go through, and each one of them provides an opportunity for saturation. So be mindful of that it's a long equation of addition. You're going to be adding some saturation at each level. So beware when setting your preamp knob not to go too high too soon. The preamp itself, when overdriven, provides sort of a shiny kind of overdrive or distortion. It's a very projecting sound. It's an excellent place to get the singy, nasal or mid-range character that you need for a solo to drive through the mix of a song. Its function is to boost the weak signal from your guitar or bass to the next stage, to another level that can be further processed. So the sweetness of saturation and the vocal-like smoothness all come from the preamp. Next, the tone section. The tone stack, it's often called. On older amps, like we talked about in the tube amp generations episode, older amps don't have 3 knobs for tone. They probably just have 1. And it's kind of just a treble roll-off on those amps. Modern amps, we expect to see a bass knob and a mid knob and a treble knob. And what's going on behind there is those knobs are connected to capacitors. And when all connected together, they form the tone stack. The tone stack is a filtration matrix. Your whole signal goes in and is kind of divided into bass and then divided into middle and divided into treble. And the setting of all those knobs creates a curve, an EQ curve. This is where most of the confusion for any guitarist comes from, because the tone stack is so capable that you can really bend a guitar sound completely into something new. But what's the right answer? And the answer is always, well, it depends. Some guitarists use an even blend of bass, of mid, of treble. Others use only the mid knob, only the mid knob. Other guitarists scoop away the mids, leaving only the bass and treble. That's 3 different, very different opinions of how to run a tone stack on perhaps the same amp that will get you very different results. And they're all used for different reasons, but they're things to keep in mind when setting your amp. More bass, of course, provides a fuller sound, but it can get a little messy sometimes with too much. Too much treble sounds, it just sort of adds clumsiness. I always find that having too much treble brings out so many details that you can hear my fingers tapping on things with a level of detail that I don't want people to have. I want them to experience a smooth sound to my guitar playing, and adjusting down the treble, turning that down somewhere, either on the amplifier or at your guitar, helps smooth things out. The reason to run a mid knob all the way down is that is where a lot of mud can happen. And it's called tone scooping. When you turn the bass up, turn the treble up, scoop the mid out, and run the amp pretty good and loud. It sort of allows you to play louder, to have a louder sound without amplifying the mud. And moving on down the amp, if you're on a Fender amp, you're moving to the right, comes the master volume. It's connected to the power amp section. You've already seen the preamp, then the tone stack, and then the power amp section. So it's kind of a bucket brigade of tone. Your sound is getting magnified at each step. Inside there, in electric terms, you're getting bigger with each section. And at the conclusion of the power amp, it's going to leave the amplifier and go to the speaker. The master volume connects directly to the power amp section. The power amp is taking signal from the preamp and actually the tone stack and gain rate to drive the speakers. The master volume wasn't always put on amplifiers. Tone purists hate master volumes sometimes. They'll say, that's just another bit of circuitry that mucks things up. I like an amp with no master volume. And there are many guitarists, myself included, that will run the master volume absolutely at 10 or just off of 10. A lot of tone comes through the power amp section. The quality of the power amp section, I always find is one of power. It's one of the guts of your sound. If the preamp is the shine, is the icing on the cake, the power amp section is the big fist. It's the big boxing gloves that takes even one note and makes it powerful and impactful. Running a master volume too hot results in sort of a splatty sound. Remember, with any amplifier or section of an amplifier, you can overdo it. And you'll know when you're overdoing the power amp section because your tonal shape starts to sort of lose form. The old expression, more is more, or more is better, it doesn't really apply. More is more up to a certain point, and turning up the master volume to that point sort of fully inflates your sound like a tire needs to be fully inflated. You got to have the right amount, and it really controls that sort of low-end grunt or growl of the amplifier. But too much may not be your friend. Too much may be too much. So use the master volume if you need to control your overall volume, but be mindful of the fact that it may get splatty and out of control. Nudge it back to get that splat under control. And finally, on the back of amplifiers, sometimes now these days, are power attenuators, which is kind of like what the master volume was intended to be. But as we just discussed, a master volume does change the tone. If you were to record your amp with the master volume dimed and then record your amp with it turned way down, maybe to 5 or 3, and then you play them back in the studio, you can, through studio volume adjustments, adjust them so that you're listening to the same volume. But you'll clearly agree they're not the same sound. The one that was recorded with master volume lower is cleaner, has more headroom, doesn't have that sort of full inflated sound. It sounds like the speakers themselves are shouting, are shaking. The power attenuator takes care of that. Largely, it is simply a volume adjustment that happens after the master volume. It's a modern little circuit piece of magic that takes that volume that's already gone through the output stage, probably tubes, which are adding to the sound, adding to your tone, and simply does some math on it, subtracts some, or divides it. Let's say it divides it in half and makes your output volume that much quieter. So it's a good way to get a very full sound without needing to run the master volume too loud. That was always a problem with tube amps, was you had to trade off, do you want great tone? Well, then you have to be willing to live with the sometimes excessive sound that it makes, the excessive volume. Power attenuator takes care of that. It's a pretty cool addition to many modern amps. Look on the back of yours, see if you have a power attenuator, or sometimes it's just a switch these days, like a half power or quarter power switch. And of course, no discussion about knobs can be complete without talking a little bit about effects. Of course, there's reverb, That's the classic. I think that was the very first effect added to an amplifier. Then came modulation like tremolo and vibrato. The only control knobs there are the depth and the speed. With either tremolo or vibrato, you've got the rate at which it goes wah, 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 wah. Or does it do it fast? Wah, 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 wah. Or does it, so that's the speed. And there's a depth control as well, whether it's big and spongy, blah, 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 or blah, 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 blah. Sometimes that little amount of depth adds just a nice little bit of polish and shine, and it's almost imperceptible. Lots of great players will use either reverb with its one knob, more reverb, or tremolo very sparingly. It's always a good idea because too many effects kind of muddy the water, and we don't want that. We want that beautifully sculpted tone that you took the time to shape. We want that beautiful tone to be coming through. Well, those are the sections of your amp. Preamp, tone section, power amp. This reminds me of that evening. And running those in concert creates your overall tone profile and your signature amount of saturation, your tone. But where to add overdrive? When is it appropriate? When is it not appropriate? And what are the best ways to go about finding your sound? I'm here to help. Let's nerd out. Let's go deep on these amp settings because there are a few secrets that pros know. And I would like you to know those so that you can try them out this week. Experimenting with different combinations of gain and EQ is fundamental, and everybody's spent some time doing it. And if you're like me, you spend even more time scratching your head. Well, which do I like better? Do I like it with the knob on the left turned all the way up and the one on the right turned down, or do I like it with vice versa, with the one on the left turned down and the one on the right turned? It can be quite a puzzle. There's a few common strategies that professionals know when setting up an amp. One basic one is walking up to an amp and putting every knob on 5. Assuming they all go 1 to 10, put every knob of the gain controls, of the preamp, of the tone, of the power amp, if it has a master volume, put them all on 5 and see what's happening. See what's happening there. Are you getting close to the sound that you want? Do you need a lot more distortion? And if so, what type? Well, let's just start there. Do you want more of an inflated and gutsy sound? If so, reach for the master volume. Turn it up. Are you looking for more of a sustainy, soloist kind of tone? If so, reach out for the preamp knob. Turn it up. And what kind of overall tone shape are you getting? Do you have too much treble? Do you have too much bass? Depending on the amp and what speakers it's outfitted with, it can be quite a difference. And that's why the tone stack is there, is to help you shape that curve of your EQ. We talked about tone sculpting or tone scooping, where you drop the mid control of your amplifier when in a high gain situation. So if you want to run your amp really good and loud, it's usually a good idea to drop that mid control, and it'll sort of clean things up. It'll let you get a loud sound, a compressed and overdriven sound, but without the mud. If you want more of a soloist tone, you may want to do the exact opposite of that. Turn up the mid, turn down the highs, turn down the lows. The lows will get in the way and be too muddy, too clumsy. The treble will be too much if you're trying to play nice vocal-like lines. Those treble details can make you sound kind of clumsy. People just hear the fingers on the fretboard, and you don't want that. You want something nice and vocal in the middle. An important thing, since we're nerding out, is to remember that every knob on your guitar amp is a volume knob. This is kind of a deep thought, but every knob is a volume knob, including your tone stack. Remember I said a good way to approach a new amp, an amp you don't know anything about, you walk up to it and got to get a good sound right away. Put every knob on 5. Why not? It's a good middle of the road place to start. So your treble, mid, and bass all set to 5, 5, and 5. Well, what happens if you set them to 7, 7, and 7? Or 10, 10, and 10? Or 2, 2, and 2? Wouldn't you think that would be the same thing? I mean, more of this, more of that, more of the other? Or less? Shouldn't your sound be going up and down? It does go up and down. You can make an amp louder by moving the tone knobs off of 5, 5, and 5 to 10, 10, and 10. It gets louder. It gets more distorted. Do you like that or do you not? It's a little tone secret that I only came to late in the game. The classic AC/DC settings, I'm told, were tone knobs at 2, 2, and 2. And that blew my mind. I'd never thought to run them all down so low. Why would they do that? Well, because it sounds different than running at 5, 5, and 5, or 10, 10, and 10. The reason it sounds different and that those tone knobs are actually volume knobs, the reason that it sounds different is that just after the tone stack of capacitors and knobs and mids and trebles and those settings comes a sort of a recapture tube or transistor. It takes the output of that tone section and amplifies it back up for the power amp section. Well, that little transistor or tube has the ability to be overdriven as well. If you overdrive it or saturate that tube, you're getting more of that particular flavor of overdrive. And overdriving that section may be great. It also may not be great. Apparently, the AC/DC fellas thought it was not great. They didn't appreciate the extra sustain that came there. And I can verify because I do this on my Marshall now. I run my tone knobs at about 2, 2, and 2 because it cleans up the sound and it lets the whatever I've chosen for a preamp sound pass through and go to the power amp section where I turn it up to get a full gutsy sound. When I run the tone knobs too hot, I feel like it gets a little splatty. It loses definition and loses impact. I just don't find the sweetness and the clarity that I want with the knobs anywhere else. So thank you guys. Thank you, AC/DC, for sharing that tip with us. There you go. Music made better by musicians sharing their info. Every knob is a volume knob, including the tone section. Guitar Nerd is a production of Seeing Music Books. Seeing Music Books makes educational books for string players of all types and levels and languages. SeeingMusicBooks.com is the place you can check out new books, concepts, grab a free lesson, and stay in touch with me here at the show. Visit SeeingMusicBooks.com today.
And know I'm in trouble 'cause I've been leaving you here a lot. Then you say you'll forget. I can work off my debt as long as I get on the job. I can't get it done.
So we know that turning a knob up too far can be too far. You might introduce more of a messy sort of tone than you meant to. But when is it a good idea to back the knobs off? Well, remember, the more we turn things up, the more saturation we get. The more we turn them down, the more it's the converse of saturation. It's called headroom. That just means that you've left enough room at the top of your amp's range that big jumps, big notes, big explosions of sound, pop, 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 can come through, and that you actually feel pop, pop, pop coming out of the speakers. Imagine you're plucking the strings with your fingers. Good and hard, you want to snap. And pop, 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 pop. You probably just drew a picture in your mind of what kind of music I'm playing. Pop, 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 pop. Maybe you heard funk. Maybe you heard country. Those would both be good guesses. And in those genres, playing with a good amount of headroom is desirable because you want to get that sort of spanky rhythm that's not lengthened out. The more you compress and sustain and overdrive things, the more your notes take on length, sustain. And in the cleaner genres, they want to hear headroom. Good time to start turning stuff down. And remember what I said about the preamp. If you've already destroyed the headroom by turning it all the way up to 10, you won't get it back. If you're looking for a headroom kind of sound and you like things that pop and have a lot of cleanliness, you got to start clean to end clean. Okay, this week we explored the architecture of amplifiers, the preamp, the tone stack, the power amp, how each section contributes to the overall sound. They're all volume knobs. Isn't that crazy? Thank you to everybody for listening. I appreciate it. I appreciate the love you're sending on social media, leaving reviews. Your thoughts keep me going. Appreciate it. Next week, better bending. Yeah, we're going to stretch those strings. Bending is fundamental to so many kinds of music, and it's one of the most awesome things that we can do as string players. I'm going to give you some tips to get your bends sounding right and to feed your creativity with a few new ways to perform some bends. I like to imagine a world full of great music. I don't always hear the music I want to hear in the world these days, but you've got it inside you, and I want to hear what's inside of you. Everybody wants to hear what's inside of you. Musician, you can do this. Let's get your music out and into the world. Experiment with your amp settings this week. And now that you know about the sections and their sort of tonal responsibility, see how they change your sound. See if you can aim for a target, like increasing your overdrive in a pleasant manner. And take a look at your favorite guitar players and see how they use their amps to create their signature tones. There's tons of resources available on YouTube, and I love getting nerdy, watching the backstage, watching roadies explain different guitar setups and how they've got the knobs set. There are many of those, and it's such an amazing resource when you're trying to figure out your own tone. Until next time, have a great nerdy week. I'm Andy Schneider, and you've been listening to Guitar Nerd. You got to know